think this is a good example of an artwork that expands outside of its field and isn't about being kept in sort of the prisons of power. The fact that you could buy the artwork and walk off with it at a newsstand is just like you can with Artforum, I think is a pretty powerful thing. My interpretation is an interpretation of an art historian's interpretation of Francis Picabia's La Jeune Fille. This artwork was printed in a broadside in 1920 in Paris called Proverb by the poet Paul Ouillard. This was something that I think was distributed at various Dada events for either free or a small fee. The piece consisted of a section on the broadside where Picabia requested that his artwork be simply a die cut in the surface of the front page of the broadside. Flanking the die cut are two descriptions, La Jeune Fille, which means the young girl in French, and something that approximates the bracelet of life below it. Picabia and many of the Dadaists were often interested in making puns. Many of those were sexual, sexist, or misogynistic in nature. Perhaps when people encountered this artwork, the immediate interpretation was a joke, a pun, or a provocation. Cut to almost 100 years later, 90 years later, this art historian, George Baker, publishes a book where he finds this Picabia artwork on this broadside. Using a bit of imagination, he's able to ascribe a lot more meaning to this artwork than perhaps it was given in 1920. What Baker is focusing on is the beginning of both Picabia and Duchamp's attempt to upend the artwork from the way that it's perceived or consumed. And this happens in Duchamp's large glass, Picabia's transparencies, Picabia's transparent paintings. And why I think this particular work is so important to me is that the artwork was democratic and disseminated. It wasn't meant to be seen in a museum or a gallery or a salon. It wasn't meant to be seen at the artist's home. It was meant to be distributed out into the world so that the public would literally have to interface with the artwork for the artwork to work. And for Picabia, this could have just been a one-off gesture. Perhaps it wasn't even intellectualized at all. A lot of the content and context in which Picabia has conceived of this thing becomes a little bit irrelevant to me nearly 100 years later. What I become interested in is the rediscovery of it via another art historian's interpretation, which then suddenly, perhaps this one-off gesture, becomes really relevant in the new millennium when reality TV is proliferating, the Iraq War is happening, built upon a complete fabrication. Artists like Wade Guyton are printing out paintings. Photographers are beginning to make digital photography composed entirely in the digital realm. So I think that perhaps the artwork was unable to even maybe be received in its time. I think that this particular work is very much about divorcing the artwork from the moorings that hold it and letting it go out into the world and be interpreted however it wants to be interpreted. It's very much putting the artwork back in the hands of the audience itself, where the artist honestly loses control of its interpretation.